Today, not Sunday not coming anymore.
Where's the Sunday there? A long time.
Sunday is here.
Good afternoon, good afternoon. Welcome to another Sunday Scoops. It is Sunday. And you know if it's Sunday, Richie?
It is Sunday Scoops.
Yeah, man.
Absolutely.
Well, today we have a big treat for everybody.
Yeah, you hear them say if you have a big tree, you need a small axe. No, this is a big axe.
No, not tree, Richie. Treat.
You can't listen. I'm a Jamaican.
That's why I mustn't wake up people so early. Sunday morning, you know.
But today we're gonna provide a nice little treat. We're revisiting, staying with the Jamaica's music legacy. It's our 60th anniversary of independence. We're still in the celebration mode. According to the experts, we're celebrating for the entire year. And so we want to bring this piece of music legacy to the fore, Mento music. And today our guest is none other than the erstwhile Mr. Colin Smith. And see how him shirt pretty and him thing and
Yeah, man.
there
Him
with us.
guitar, them and him banjo and him drum and all them something.
And absolutely, man, I'm telling you, we need to raid that house and take some of them equipment.
Yeah,
You know,
on pain of death.
oh, Lord have mercy. Magic, you hear that? On pain of debt. Him so like him and you boys in the same league.
Listen, my wife knows that she is number two behind all the guitars, banjo,
Oh, my
violin, and mandolins and instruments of kind.
Wow.
Yes.
Well, party, at least.
You have any sitar?
No, I don't. But that is on the bucket list.
Okay.
Bucket list is
I
right.
was saying I'm going to India.
But guess what? Today we're gonna focus on Mento music, and you know, Colin is the champion of that. And you know, I think God, the best way to get us started is just to tease
With that
the
song.
audience
Yeah,
with
man.
a little bit of a classic.
And who else to do it with but one of the benefactors of our cultural heritage, one of the persons, the most outspoken person, and is with Honorable Louise Bennett Coverley with a song called Deo. One word to say in that song where you me love, you know, and it just bring me back to my youth when we used to make kata out of banana trash. We carry the banana from the banana ground over to the packing plant over in Coleyville, little place called Camp Gate, which was once the site of a British Army camp. That's why the place named Camp Gate. You see how literal Jamaicans are?
Hey, but listen, you want to know some of the history behind some of these songs. But today we're gonna dive into the history of this fantastic musical heritage that we have, and as we said earlier, you know, nobody better in our opinion to carry us through this the next 2 hours than Colin Smith. But Colin, let's get us started. Jamaica's first lady of culture, if you will, Louise Bennett Coverley. Before we even touch on Miss Lou, I want you help us understand what exactly is Mento music.
Okay. Mento music is the first recorded Jamaican music. It was not the first Jamaican music. In fact, the first Jamaican music came from the original inhabitants of Jamaica, who were the Taínos and falsely called Arawaks. And there's a small trace of their music which is still known today. We were fortunate during the time of Olive Lewin's research to have found someone who was a descendant of the Taínos who was able to teach us one song from the Taínos. So that was a song called Piki Tomache, right? So that was the first Jamaican music. However, Jamaican music as we know it today actually originated from our African ancestors. And for some reason, I believe that the African ancestors which came to Jamaica had to be among the smartest, because they quickly discovered that with the use of music, they could deceive their slave masters into thinking they were working happily, B, they were working diligently. And so what they did, they used the style of African music called call and response. And to tell you what it was, that music that you just played by Louis Bennett with the voices of some of the Frats Quintet in the background. And some point in the future, we're going to have to talk about those gentlemen, the Frats Quintet, because they played a tremendous role in Jamaica's mento music. So you hear Miss Lou singing Deo, Deo, and the answer, they the light, but me want to go home.
That's a call and
So
answer style.
call and answer. So our ancestors realized that the person who was doing the call was often called the bomber, and he would be in the cane fields or whatever fields they have. And he would, Deo, Deo, nobody working at that time. But when they say, Day the light and me want go home, that's when the hoe and the pickaxe and the thing go down. So they were still singing in 3/4 time, but that call took about a minute away. And if you calculate it, out of the nearly 24 hours singing all day and doing that, they would have got 25% of rest. So that method of singing came down to us, and it is still popular in Africa today. It's an African way of singing. But they used it to make the guys feel happy and to give themselves a rest. Okay? So when the slave owners would have their crop over dance and they would have brought their own instruments and they would have these parties, they would play some of their English songs, their mazurkas, their chatees, their waltzes, and all that sort of thing. But being the expert musicians that some of our ancestors were, it didn't take the slave owners long to realize, hey, some of these guys can play music. And they would often, because not all plantation owners were extremely wealthy persons, so to speak. You had, in some research I did in my own ancestry, we realized that in the district where I'm from, that there were many slave owners who gave names to some of the places that I knew in my district. And they would have maybe 6 or 8 slaves, okay? And they would Christianize them and give them Christian names and so on. So they couldn't afford the big bands, and when they want to do their thing, they would invite the African slaves to come and be part of the musical crowd. And so our African ancestors learned the waltzes and the chatees and the polkas and so on. But for them, it was a joke music. So after the party was over, they would go back to their own quarters and add their little thing to it, and which is the mentor that we know. Okay.
And one of those songs would have been a song like Jane and Louisa, right?
Exactly,
So
Jane and
let's,
Louisa.
yeah, so let's
right.
give the listeners a taste of that song, and it is done by your Tallawah Mento Band. Jane and Louisa will soon come home.
Leave the singing to the man.
No, you have to give the people, you have to give the people them a little
No,
vocals, because
you
up here instrumental that
No, you can't. Mr. Smith
Guys,
do the singing, right?
Let nobody tell you you can't sing. If you can talk, you can
Colin,
sing.
you know,
Just that
Colin,
some of us sing better than some.
Brethren,
Oh, my
the people them tell me say I talk in a join up.
but Colin, seriously, that little story you raised a while ago had me on the ropes. I'm not somebody who who is short on the history, but just following the thread, it just takes you back, so you get a sense of where we're coming from and the kind of traditions that well, certainly your own research has unearthed. We know the role Olive Lewin played in terms of hammering out the foundations of this this research and this culture, and again may the big man upstairs rest our soul. And since we're on that topic, how first of all, is Mento only played in Jamaica? That first question.
No, absolutely not. And that is an interesting story, and it's something I intend to do some further work on. To the best of my knowledge right now, and from what I am able to glean, there are two, maybe 5 or 6 mentor bands worldwide. Um, it has come to my attention that there are two in Panama, one in Costa Rica for sure, because I was speaking with one of my mentor band members in Jamaica. There's another mentor band in Jamaica of which I'm associated with called Rokum Band Mentor Band. And they were touring with the folk singers in Costa Rica. And they went into this village and they were walking through. And then they heard this mentor music coming. And so the guys rushed and got their instrument and went and joined them. And these guys were playing mentor music exactly like you would hear it in Jamaica.
If I'm
Okay?
not mistaken, there is a side of one side of Costa Rica where a lot of that speaks English in the first instance,
Yes.
and where the cultures and the customs are very similar to what obtains in the Caribbean,
Yes.
certainly the Eastern and Western Caribbean, right? So
Yes,
that
indeed.
that wouldn't be
A lot of Jamaicans migrated there and they took the culture with them. The same with Panama.
right.
So just to continue where I was going. So there's one in Costa Rica, two in Panama. There's a mentor band in Germany. There's a mentor band in Spain. There's a mentor band in Hawaii, I'm made to understand. Japan. Okay. I believe there may be one in Australia as well. I need to research that further. So mentor, and these people play mentor as we would have known mentor back in the 40s and the 50s. Um, I came across a gentleman in the course of my research who one of these days I will arrange for you to have him on this program. That gentleman did extensive, he's from New York, he's American, and he did several tours to Jamaica and came to Jamaica and lived in Jamaica and stayed at the homes of several mentor band leaders. As a matter of fact, the man could tell me the name of every mentor band that won a prize in the Festival of Arts since 1962. Right?
In fact, I hold that thought because that's something that I want to develop on.
Yes.
I am. It is my understanding, and you just basically open the door to it, that there were before we had regular this festival song and thing. You had these popular this song mentor band contest in Jamaica,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And in fact, all of that was morphed together in the mid '60s when we start to talk about this whole concept of festival.
Right.
But before we dive into that, I'm pretty sure God have himself lined up here a couple pieces that we wanna just to keep the listeners, the musical side of the
Sure.
show flowing. We wanna run a couple pieces and we'll come back and talk about that mentor band contest. God?
Sure. It was entertainment. It was education. The average mentor band, say, in a village, and I'm putting my mind's eye back to when I was a boy in the hills of St. Elizabeth. And these guys, eventually, when newspapers come around, they were almost 2 weeks late. But these guys would take the topical stories and they would make songs around them. And because everybody, not many people could read,
Right.
okay? And they found a way of telling these stories of what was going on, you know?
You
Um,
know, that's a running theme that I find in listening to all of these songs is the first word that jump out at me when I listen to all of these songs is experiences.
yes,
These
yes.
songs spoke of the experience that these guys were having.
And you know what is so good too in a lot of them? They never call the names of the people who
We're so charged. Yes.
these incidents happen to. It will either be John or Tom, or so on, you know. I remember there's a old
John
mentor
Paul.
one called Rima. And the words go, I was living a decent and contented life when a soldier man came in and mashed up my life. For every Sunday she went to Rima, hugging and kissing and romancing with the soldier. And what happened back, um, Rima, that section of Kingston that we all know,
Arnett Gardens.
yes,
Yeah.
there used to be a soldier camp down there. And the ladies from nearby, they would, because there were no washing machines and so on, they would go there and wash their clothes. And this lady used to wash for a particular soldier man. And the rest of the song tells the story. And the poor husband, regardless of what he did, she would just kiss him on the cheek and go
Gone
back
on
in
a
the
soldier
morning.
man.
Yeah, because the soldier
Yes.
man have a longer gun.
Oh, my
And you know, quite a few mentor songs you had the soldier man featuring.
Yes, man.
Yes,
Fan me,
fan me,
there
soldier
is,
man,
soldier
fan
man,
me.
fan me.
Fan me,
yes,
soldier
Pardon
man,
the
fan
soldier
me.
man,
Girl, me
fan me.
yeah, you call your character
Yes,
God.
and when soldier man come here for quote me and give me 1 shilling and quatty.
Yes,
Me
yes.
take it by silk and satin. And then Jeremiah, who was our boyfriend, take it and fling it away in a pingwing maca.
I feel it's the same soldier man, though. That soldier man, no Arima.
Well,
No, that one is from the British regiment.
yes, yes. No, there was a thing for uniform in those days, you know. We have a song that we call Rebecca, which speaks to a girl from the country. And when she came to Kingston the first time and she saw the fire brigades man and the policeman and thing, man, the song says she throw away the banjo man and throw away the guitar man because them no wear uniform. You know. So the uniform had a lot of, you know, influence on these ladies. Yeah.
No,
But
a question. Just a bit, take while you process. There is this tendency, certainly in the early days, where people looked at mentor and tend to conflate with calypso.
yes.
You know, based on, you know, the calypso coming out of Trinidad and Trinidad and Tobago and Jamaica. But and in fact, some of these records, and we're going to talk about the recording side of the business as well,
Right.
were released on a calypso label, right?
Yes.
Talk about that a little bit.
Okay. Calypso had a great influence on Mento, and I'll tell you, the Trinidadian Calypso at one point was the top export of Caribbean music. And so the term Calypso was referred to almost any Caribbean music.
Right.
Okay. And a lot of mentor bands would sing Calypso songs, albeit with a mentor style. And we even had some who sing mentor songs, Calypso style. Lord Creator was one of them.
Count Lasher
And
would be one of
speaking
them.
of Lord, one of the biggest influence on mentor that Calypso had was that the Calypsonians of Trinidad at the day had a way of referring to themselves as lords and counts and prince and so forth. And Mento players eventually adopted that and gave rise to a lot of Jamaican artists, Mento artists, themselves being Count Lasha, um, Count
Creator.
Lebe,
Yeah.
you know, Lord Tanamo, right? And we could go on and you know, Count Owen, you know, a lot of them. So they got these names, you know, and that became a strong mentor. You would hardly find a mentor band at the time that didn't have a count or a lord or a prince as the leader of the band.
And by the Tallawah Mento Band, Rebecca, the girl from country.
Two things. We first of all we're talking about the mentor contest, Colin. But prior to that, before we get to that, one of the things that we observed, you know, while the music was going on there is there's a sort of a Spanish lilt that comes through when you're listening to how the rhythms, the mental rhythms were brought together. You get this
Especially on the Fan Me Soldier
Fan
Man,
Me Soldier Man, Fan Me, and
which
then
was by Dan Williams and his orchestra.
absolutely. So you're getting these influences, and my personal research says a lot of our music, while there's that African component, yes, it's really you're looking at a compendium of different influences. You talked about earlier in the show, the plantation owners who have them own like a
Benguin and
party
the
and thing.
polka
Right.
and all
And
these
so
other.
everybody who were colonizers brought with them their own music, because they bring their culture. And so, what we have with Mento, it appears to me, is a sort of a melding of all of these different cultures. And so in the music, you are getting the different influences. Your thoughts?
Yes, you're absolutely right. And I'll tell you, you might want to consider in some future program to look at the influence of neighboring countries on Mento. Our Cuban neighbors had a strong influence on Mento. For example, the rumba box that came to Jamaica by way of Cuba. Okay.
Right.
Um, there is a song we have which we call Peanut Vendor. We could look at that music, um, and we could look at a Cuban music called El Manicero and tell me what you think is the difference. Okay. Other than we singing some words in English, they are singing in Spanish. We put our own words. We have the same influence from our Haitian neighbors. Readily
Creole.
coming to mind is a song called, we call in Jamaica, Yellow Bird. That song was written in 1776 by a Haitian gentleman, and the name was a bit of poetry called Shukun, which was later put to music, right? And they sing in Creole. You can just on the chorus, Tis oiseau na bois qui t'a écouté, tis oiseau na bois qui t'a écouté, comment songe ça, moi gagner la peine, car depuis juste ça, des pieds de mon chêne.
There was some sort of a struggle with the music, the music itself, shifting from one style to the next because the beats. In fact, just to jump forward a little bit, when Rocksteady came into vogue, it was Hopetoun Lewis got with that
Yes.
easy, take it
Drive
easy
Her
song,
Home.
right? And
Oh yeah, take it easy. Talk about transitioning to reggae.
because and he really wanted to record that song in a ska beat, So you get a sense where it's not that one music stopped and the other took over, because again, a lot of the mental stylings, you can hear them in the ska as well. Just look, if you take the time, and you just made that point about where the different influences were coming from. But before we had gone to the break, I had mentioned this thing about the contest. The band Mento. There was a Mento band contest, and I would love if you could just elaborate on that a little bit for us.
Yes, this was a good thing being done by the Social Development Commission. And I would say, even to this day, if you listen to a lot of the songs that get entered in what is now the festival song, a lot of them have a mental base to it. And some of the regular featured entrants in this festival song competition, Stanley and the Turbines, Eric Donaldson, they still play mentor songs. A lot of the schools, when they do their entry, they are using mentor songs for the most part. So it is there. And it's not going to go away, and I don't think anyone is saying that it should come back or anything like that. All we're saying is that it should be preserved, you know. But sorry, you were saying.
No, I'm glad you make that point again, because you kind of jump forward to another issue that I really want us to look at, and that is the influence of the music and the school system. But even before we touch that, you have been involved in this business for how long?
Oh, since I was, let me see
When you say
now,
since you was a
20,
boy.
50 plus years.
Wow.
Yeah, almost 60 years.
How did you get started in it?
Okay. First of all, I was, as a country boy, I couldn't help but being influenced by the mentor bands around my district.
So
And
like
when I was a bit shy of age 20, I was invited to this group that was just being formed called the Jamaican Folk Singers. And really joining that group was like a university education. And I have been with that group to this day. When I get a chance, I go to Jamaica. I still attend their rehearsals. When it was their 50th anniversary, I went down with Tallawah Mento Band and we joined them for their concert. So we have that. A number of the Rukumbine Mento Band in Jamaica are members of the Jamaican Folk Singers. And they had a mighty mentor band back in. I sent you a clip of a recording that was done with them back in the early 70s, if you can find it. Because to me, that's one of the finest examples of mentor music ever recorded. It's it's an instrumental piece of music, but it shows the dexterity and the excellence of improvisation, which is one of the elements of mentor. Most mentor players didn't read music and things like that. They had music inside of them. And so when they got a piece of music or they were playing music, it was a lot of improvisation. And no two mentor bands would play the same songs. And a lot of early mentor music was folk music. A lot of the old folk songs is what was used, Hold Him Joe, things like that. But the improvisation, sometime there is Rod Dennis Mentor Band doing, I think, Hill and Gully and Hold Him Joe. And you listen to, that's an old folk song. But there's a lot of banjo improvisation. They had a banjo player called Carlton James. Again, one of the finest examples of mentor banjo player that ever came out of Jamaica, right? There are so many examples, and I know I'm jumping around a little bit, but you take, for example, one of the earliest recordings of mentor was done by a band called the Littitz Mentor Band. T. Miller. He played the fiddle, which was the European influence coming into mentor, And if you can find that track, that's a good one to play as well.
Hi there. If you enjoyed that clip, go on over to our website at yawdmedia.com, where you can watch the entire broadcast at your leisure. And while you're there, why don't you check out our other reggae music features? And before you leave, pick up some of our Jamaican reggae merchandise, and hey, don't forget to tell your friends.